All right, so for today's demo day, we're glad to have Hank Doupe here. Hank is founder, president of Compute Tooling. He's also a maintainer of a PSL library catalog model, and that is the Param Tools software package, which is used by a number of other models in the library. Hank has also created the Compute Studio web platform, which hosts open source models, and you'll find a few PSL models hosted on that platform. And today, Hank is going to demonstrate how to link multiple models on that platform. So Hank, take it away.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Jason. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So I'll start out with saying that I got a little carried away with putting this demo together. And so I might have bit off a little bit more than I could chew, but I think it's kind of cool. So I wound up building a little GUI that ties together a few apps on Compute Studio. And I built it on top of the Compute Studio API and not actually as a Compute Studio app. And the main reason for that is this makes it easier just with the way things are set up now for someone to log in to this application through Compute Studio, and then this PSL Stitch application can create simulations on their behalf. Whereas if I just made it a Compute Studio application, then I could create simulations using my own API key, but then the people creating simulations to that app wouldn't have the sub simulations created. Maybe this will become a little bit more clear as I go through the demo. But the main idea is you can take some policy parameters, which are like the ones in TaxBrain, and that's just the parameter indexing and just individual income taxes. And then you can take tax cruncher parameters, and those are going to be your individual income tax parameters. And so if we hop over here, we can see it's like your age, how many, number of children under 13, and then cost of capital calculator parameters and so on. And those are going to be your business tax parameters. And we've got great demos on all these applications, so I hope people go and check those out to learn more about what's going on there. But the idea is you can take parameters from all these different apps, feed them into this one interface, and then create a bunch of simulations. And then so I'll do a quick demo showing how that works. So I'm just going to grab a link here to some examples I've put together. Sorry for all the code, but this is a bit of a technical presentation. So this is going to grab policy parameters from TaxBrain simulation 49779, which is the simulation that Matt Jensen used when he did his demo with the Compute Studio API. And so we're going to grab that, and then a few tax cruncher parameters. So this is the S age, and this I just put this in as my own age, 25, and then I'm going to grab some business tax parameters right here and plug them in, and then I'm going to click submit. And you can see over here, got some action going on. We've created some simulations. Here's what the cost of capital calculator simulation looks like. And you can see our corporate income tax rate. If we look at our individual income and our individual and payroll tax parameters, we can see that the value is set to 10%, which is what it was set as in Matt's demo. And so this is, we're just going to keep running and checking to see if the results are ready yet. So it looks like the inputs were validated correctly for all of them. They're still running.
While this is running, can I jump in with a question?
Yeah, please.
So just to clarify, so you've got kind of a dictionary format for tax crunch and CCC parameters, for the policy parameters that go to the tax brain app, did you, where did you get that? It looked like a URL or something. Where did you get that from?
Right. So this is a link to a demo that Matt did. And so I'll hop over there real quick and show you. Should have had this link prepared, but here we are. Cool. So this is what Matt did his demo on. And I believe all this did was adjust this FICA parameter. So set it to 10% in the start year 2021. And so what's going on under the hood is Param Tools is reading this URL, and it knows that it knows this specific URL format, and it will go and use the Compute Studio API to grab the simulation information for 49779, and then it's going to go to the inputs, and then this adjustment dictionary, which all that means is it's the adjustment is just this here, behavior and policy, and it's gonna grab the policy dictionary there. So it's just grabbing this but it's a nice way to link to other simulations quickly without having to type out all the Python code to make it work.
Yeah, okay, that's really neat. And then you created this app. It looks like it's hosted on your machine, but you're running things on the cloud on Compute Studio's platform. Is that right?
Exactly. Cool. Yeah. So this is all running on the platform. So this created 3 simulations, and one of them we can look at the tax cruncher one is still going, and so that one finished, and you can see that the age of the spouse 25, which was the parameter I modified, and then for the policy parameters, it's set to 10%, and so that worked as expected. But so I doing some live debugging coding. I was working on getting the polling to work correctly, but I don't want to overwhelm the Compute Studio server by hammering it with these results. But this is what the Compute Studio API gives you when the simulation is done. So this is the output from the cost of capital calculator simulation. And you get a lot of good information here. You can use the Compute Studio developer toolkit to download this data and work with it locally. But just as a example for what you can get, even just looking at the this raw output, is you can grab a picture of one of the outputs. So this is the summary table from the cost of capital calculator run. So that's available. So maybe if I had more time or did some more careful planning, I could have rendered some images pretty quickly, and that would have been cool. But the main idea is that the simulations are all created on Compute Studio. So these are the 3 that I created a few minutes ago, and then you can go and check them out. I could link to the other simulations in the description, so I could refer to them easily. But this is the main idea of the app. It's just one place where you can plug in parameters for a few different applications and then run them all at once. Then you pull the results down, and you can view the outputs for each one, and then kind of dive in a little bit more either through the Compute Studio application or through the API locally. So how is this working under the hood? So we'll do a quick little dive into the code. So there are 3 main components to make this application work. First, there's just a regular Python module, and this is what's doing the logic of actually putting the apps together. And so we have a function to create a simulation, and that's going to take a few arguments like the policy parameters, the tax cruncher parameters, cost of capital calculator parameters, and some behavior response parameters. And then it's going to loop over all those items, and then it's going to read them using param tools to read JSON, and that can read anything from a file path to a JSON string to a URL of a variety of formats. It uses file system spec under the hood, and that's a project created by some Dask maintainers that makes it easy to read data from GitHub, Amazon, S3 buckets, Google Cloud Storage buckets, and then you can define your own formats, which is what I did with the Compute Studio URL. So it's going to read those. It has some special formatting for the policy objects. And then, so once we've read in the data and we've mapped everything using our label mappings, because each of the apps have their own section labels. So the cost of capital calculator uses individual and payroll tax parameters for the policy section, but Tax Cruncher uses policy with a capital P, and TaxBrain uses policy with a lowercase p. So we need some way to do a crosswalk from one app to the other with the different parameters. So we're just going to loop over those here. And suppose we wanted to add another application to this, another Compute Studio model to this, we could just create a new entry in our name mapping. Maybe we wanted to do OGUSA, then we could have our map the policy parameters to that, and then add the OGUSA specific parameters, and then the rest of the app would work as expected. And so now that we've mapped everything, we create the simulations using the Compute Studio API, and I have a helper function here to create the different model API clients, and that's just it's a dictionary, one client for each application. And so once we have our clients, we've created our responses, we give some helpful logging, and that's, you can see that in the logs. So we created our simulations and the different IDs, so 164, 760, 5294, and that's what we have here for the different IDs. And so it's all tied together. And then we have a couple of functions for checking whether our inputs were validated correctly, and for retrieving our simulations. So this is the bare bones of it, and this is something that you could run locally. You don't need any type of web application to run this. You just need your Compute Studio API key, and then you're good to go. And does that track with you guys? Does that make sense, Jason?
Yeah, so I see this as kind of a nice application where if I want to, so you've got three, really, if you count the behavioral responses, four separate models that help you analyze fiscal policy here. And so if you wanted kind of a broad analysis, it looks like if I were to have already done one or done some analysis of a policy on TaxBrain and gotten, say, you know, the revenue tables that I was interested in, but I wanted to go further and see what the impacts are on a specific individual or on businesses, this application ties that all together, and I can just call up those parameters I've already input into TaxBrain and use them in these other apps. Or I guess you could do vice versa, right? You could choose some parameters from that you put into Tax Cruncher and look at a broad-based analysis of what that does to revenues as a whole, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've got it. And depending on how technical we want to get, I built an API on top of this. This is just my, I found an excuse to build an API, and so that's what I did. This is the stuff that makes me excited. And you can view the documentation for it. It's built on Fast API. you can, so this is just something to authenticate with Compute Studio. All of that is there. And then I built a React app on top of the API. So if anyone was interested in learning some React, this is a fairly straightforward React application. So if anyone wanted to jump in and learn some React and try to improve this PSL Stitch application, then this might be a good place to get started. None of the code is on GitHub yet. I'm planning to push it the next couple of days as I clean things up. So you have a front end with React, a back end with our REST API. And then one of the things that I added over the weekend is authentication with Compute Studio. And so what's going on here is this is just the React app that's running locally, and I can click this link and it'll take me to Compute Studio. It's very bare bones right now. I just put it together to make this demo work. As I said, I did all this work in the past 48 hours, so give me a little leeway on how clean this looks. But it says, okay, do I want to authorize a PSL Stitch app? It's going to need to read simulations and create simulations on my behalf. I click authorize, and then I pop up here. And it's all good to go. And then so if someone else wanted to create simulations on their profile, they could do that once this is online. But one of the main reasons that I think this flow of doing things is pretty interesting is you get a lot more flexibility over what you can do with the Compute Studio API, because in the platform there, with contributing code directly into the web interface on Compute Studio, is you can just build stuff on top of the API. You can build it however you want to. You can make it as simple or as complex as you need to, and you don't have to worry about all the complexity that goes into the Compute Studio web application. You just have to know how the API works, and then you can build whatever you want, put together as many applications as you want. If you have ideas for how the inputs should look for your models, I've talked with some of the app publishers on Compute Studio, and they've thought it'd be cool to have slider bars for their inputs. And that's something that just hasn't made its way into Compute Studio yet, because there's just various priorities. But if you wanted to build a little separate application for your Compute Studio app, you could do it like this with normal web technologies. And so that just means that Compute Studio provides a bunch of building blocks where if you want to stray from the normal publish an app on Compute Studio flow, you can create an app like this and do it. If you put more time in it, it might look a little prettier than what we have now. But this is the gist of my demo. If anyone has questions, I'd like to answer them. I've probably glossed over some details, so if anyone's curious, I'd be happy to talk more. This is it.
Well, Hank, this is great. It looks like some of this front end code that you wrote there to do the app locally. Hopefully, you can share that like in a blog post to follow up here, so we can follow through with kind of designing this ourselves, customizing it for our use cases.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to publish this, and I'm happy to figure out what are some parts that could be shared. If someone else wanted to create an application like this, then they could just take kind of the framework and then build on top of it, so they don't have to think through how to set up authentication with Compute Studio and how to manage user credentials and that kind of thing.
Hank, this is Rick Evans. I have a question.
Sure.
I put this in the chat, but there's in the policy simulation library GitHub organization, there's the TaxBrain repository that kind of allows you to put together different models and get output from those different models. Is this kind of the cloud version of what TaxBrain was trying to do, or maybe you can kind of describe the differences between this PSL Stitch and TaxBrain.
Sure. So I think one of the things on TaxBrain's roadmap is to add OGUSA and to combine other models. Like, I'm not sure about cost of capital calculator, but I know OGUSA is, or Anderson Fraley, the maintainer of TaxBrain, has worked on getting that integration to work. And so this was just something that was kind of a quick and dirty way to combine everything using all of these applications that already exist. This was just a simple way to demonstrate how to create something using on top of the Compute Studio API to combine different apps together. But I think some of this functionality could be put into TaxBrain, like combining different models in PSL, like cost of capital calculator, HUSA. I think there's stuff that we could do with TaxBrain where maybe we can plug in a URL from a simulation run in another model, and then TaxBrain can use those inputs and kind of read from the API in the same way that this application did. Like, we plugged in a URL to a TaxBrain run, but maybe in the TaxBrain web application, we could have an input box where we plug in a URL from a cost of capital calculator run, and then TaxBrain gets those inputs from that run, and then the policy inputs, and then creates a simulation with those. So I don't think this is too much different. I think this is more just a different purpose, and this was a fun project that I worked on this weekend, and that would be a cool way to show what you can do with the Compute Studio API. And then it also gave me a chance to think about how someone might want to build an external application on top of the Compute Studio API. So long answer to your question, but they're not too different. This is just a different purpose.
All right, Hank, well, thank you so much for showing us this kind of ability to use Compute Studio in a more flexible way and how to deal with its API and run things locally.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you. We'll look for the blog post where we can get our hands on this code too.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, thanks a lot, Hank. Take care.
Yeah,